I will continue with, we are going with Denise. I think you are here, right? Can you try, while I read your presentation, can you try uploading your presentation?
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Yeah. Can you try sharing your presentation, please? I will read your bio note while you share your screen. Okay. Okay. Denise Alexandra Mircea is an early career researcher specializing in English literature at the University of Zaragoza. She graduated with a degree in English study from the University of Zaragoza in 2023. The following year, in 2024, she obtained a master's degree in teacher for mandatory secondary education. Baccalaureate, vocational training, and language arts and sports. She received an outstanding for her master final project, which investigated the implementation of drama and drama techniques in the EFL classroom. Her main research interests lie in memory and trauma studies, myths, and feminist writings. Okay, so whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, no worries.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Well, my name is Denise Mircea. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for accepting my proposal, as it's a great honor to be here virtually in this conference. Firstly, I would like to begin with a brief introduction of my presentation, followed by the theoretical framework. In the development, I will explain the importance of retelling the story, the archetypal of the evil stepmother, and the origins of traumas, the protagonist traumas, and the need for scriptotherapy. And lastly, I will conclude with an overview of the main points of this talk. Savage Reply 2020 by Deirdre Sullivan offers a feminist rewriting of the Irish myth of the Children of Lear. The novel centers on the perspective of Aoife, the traditionally vilified stepmother figure who, according to the legend, transformed with a spell King Lear's children into swans for 900 years as an act of jealousy due to Lear's love for his children instead of for her. And therefore, the aim of this paper is to scrutinize the portrayal of the archetypal evil stepmother through the lenses of the feminist literary criticism, while also analyzing the origins of Aoife's trauma and the need for scriptotherapy, drawing upon Kathy Garrett's trauma theory and Hank Suzette's concept of scriptotherapy. It has to be said that at the end of the 1960s, feminist literary criticism emerged to challenge the traditional literary canon and question its authority, particularly the representation of women in literature. Feminist critics argued that male-dominant literary criticism defined what was considered important, often dismissing women's writing as insignificant or censoring its subject matter. Consequently, feminist literary criticism sought to reread male-authored text to expose how women had been marginalized or misinterpreted and reclaim women's voices as a necessary rupture from the past. This act of rewriting can also be understood through the lenses of trauma theory, where Kathy Garrett 2016 highlights how trauma disrupts and fragments narratives, just as the way the canon has fractured women's voices by silencing and distorting their experiences. Therefore, rewriting becomes an act of recovery and healing, a way to confront and re-articulate the suppressed narratives. Suzette Hank's concept of scriptotherapy further supports this idea by means of framing writing as a form of catharsis and a way of working through trauma and self-redefinition. And from this perspective, feminist rewriting is not merely a literary act, but also a therapeutic one, allowing women to reclaim the agency and reconstruct the identities that have been distorted by dominant narratives. One of the ideas that the novel centers on is the double-sided story, the importance of retelling one's story from a personal perspective. In chapter M, Aoife highlights how her own voice and desire to show that truth depends on perspective rather than a single version of the events. I quote, "I'm seeking a truth, at least my truth." And this is important as she criticizes how a single version of the story often vilifies those who may not be truly villains, because, I quote, "nobody bothered reading between lines too much," end quote. This is especially important because the repetition of the same story becomes an almost undeniable truth, which allows people to define others' identities, even if they are incomplete or biased, as put in the same chapter. And if you tell a story often enough, it becomes the thing that's written down. Nevertheless, Oife highlights that storytelling has long been used to manipulate truth and reinforce authority to serve particular interest. For example, in chapter 2, she states, even with events that really happened, with every teller, something tends to change. Hair color or the food served at the feast, we put ourselves into tales we tell, and to do that, we must remove part of someone else. And in another chapter, the chapter Or, she says, people can always find ways to twist customs and tradition to suit their own ends. Those who love power will gather power. And this has to be noted that even Aife herself is a victim of this distortion, as in the original myth. Her voice and perspective are excluded. And with this retelling of the story, she exposes how knowledge can be both dangerous and a powerful weapon in one's hand. Finally, the novel draws attention to the constructed nature of the original myth, highlighting her detachment from the original version by using sentences such as, in the story, it says, this is inaccurate. That night, they were supposed to have converted to Christianity in the story, or Lear was a wonderful man. That is one story. In the original myth, Oife is confined to the archetype of the evil stepmother, which dominates traditional narratives. She is depicted as the jealous, vengeful woman who harms her husband's children, incapable of expressing love towards them. However, in some passages, Oife's opposition to violence and her empathy for others come to the fore, as when she reflected on the notion of dying in battle, thinking of that as cut of meat and people being a flesh to be eaten by crowds, but with a pity tone. Moreover, even after the children are transformed into swans, she protects them from hostile warriors and wishes them well, demonstrating that the remorse for her role in their transformation into swans. Nevertheless, it's worth mentioning that the portrayal of the evil stepmother reflects a broader social conviction embedded in the collective imagination where women who reject maternal ideals are threats to the patriarchal order. In this way, by being cast as the villain, Aoife is stripped of agency as the myth speaks for herself, and even the title, The Myth of the Children of Lear, erases her presence entirely. Consequently, she is reduced to a mere symbol of wrongdoing, an object of judgment rather than a complex human being. Her dehumanization denies her right to suffering or redemption, while the Patena figure is automatically elevated as the hero or the victim, reinforcing a patriarchal system that silences women who defy it. What needs to be mentioned is that Oife behavior can be translated into a direct consequence of the experienced childhood trauma. Abandoned by her parents at an early age, she and her other two sisters were sent to live with a foster father whose duties as a ruler were much more important than caring for them to the extent that they, I quote, become cows and then meat to be served to this warrior or that one, end quote. This experience instilled in Aife a profound sense of abandonment, craving for love, attention, and acceptance, which will shape her future relationships, trying to look for what she didn't have in her childhood in every chapter of the novel. I quote, I wanted to be heard and to be loved. I wanted to be favored, and I wasn't. All my life I have been second best. And here are some screenshots of the passages of that longing, which are present throughout the whole novel. Added to the situation, the demands for reaching perfection by the new husband, King Lear, Oife will start to take care of herself, school herself, adopting a submissive role, and give him everything to the extent that she will construct her identity around him. Eventually, she will become a shadow where she learns to be silent and more invisible, unable to recognize herself. This situation, oh, sorry. This situation will drive oh, sorry. There you go. This situation will drive her into depression, where she explicitly states that she feels a hole inside her, struggling to go outside and no longer enjoys what she once loved, even wondering if any of them will will notice if she disappeared. In the same chapter, she describes being forced to be isolated in a room for a year and how at this stage others mocked her and her disheveled appearance. This state leads to rage, mirroring the acting out stage of trauma, when she tore things up that she didn't need to tear, and at this stage is when she transforms Lear's children into swans. This trauma is further shown through her obsessive reflection on her situation and attempt to reconstruct her story. And this highlights the idea of the inability to verbalize trauma. Besides, she sometimes tries to explain her actions but can't put it into words exactly. And also, as a coping mechanism, she tells other stories to avoid telling her own, as in chapter Ulen. I'm going to tell you another story so I don't have to tell you mine. Quote. As aforementioned, this trauma brings the necessity of scriptotherapy. The chapter, written as if spoken directly to the reader, allows Oife to recount the myth from her own perspective. With this, the chapters become a room for emotional exploration, revealing the complexities of her experiences rather than simply recounting the event. This is achieved by referencing to the original myth and then delving into its deeper personal part of the story, her own. Yet, hints of the acting out phase are still present in the non-linearity narration, the repeated return to childhood memories, and the recurring imagery of blood, swans, and nature, which symbolize the trauma's cyclical replay in one's memory. Lastly, the novel's narrative techniques reinforce Oife Healing's journey from trauma. Firstly, each chapter begins with calligrams, which are poems shaped like the ancient Irish Ogham alphabets, and apart from exhibiting a connection to Irish heritage, it reflects the text's fragmentation as their nonlinear forms suggest an attempt at reconstruction. Also, calligrams become progressively harder to read, mirroring Oife's struggle. This fragmentation also appears throughout the chapters in Oife's use of unconventional prose, where isolated lines emphasize intense emotions or moments of reflection. However, the final chapters' style shifts if compared to the first one, as the sense of longing and justification is replaced by peace. Also, the language is more fluid and less fragmented, exhibiting emotional resolution and healing. Another key element is the usage of the first-person narration, which underscores writing as catharsis and reclaiming one's agency through storytelling. The narrative often becomes self-reflective as Aoife is aware and recognizes that addressing her story to someone else is in itself a healing act. Some examples may include, I did not tell you all of this before, as I have said to you before, reminded me of a swan, and I have told myself the story, the one I am telling you right now. We're almost at the end now in the versions of the story people tell. Lastly, the recurrent nature and water imagery conveys Oife's ongoing attempt to work through her trauma. Water functions as both an escape from reality and a means of reconnecting with herself. I quote, I would stay inside the water trying to remember how to stay in the world. Yet her anger of being treated as a secondary option and guilt about the curse she lays, the latter still present at the end of the novel, reveal the unresolved emotional trauma and the impossibility of fully overcoming it. This idea is also emphasized by her transformation at the end into a demon that can see but not be seen, conveying that her trauma will forever be unresolved and her narration is the attempt to face it. In conclusion, as Savage Her reply illustrates, storytelling becomes a powerful weapon not only to shape one's identity, but also to uncover what has long been suppressed. Through reimagining The Children of Lear, Sullivan gives Oife a voice that once has been silenced, transforming the tale into a journey of healing and self-redefinition. Although trauma cannot be fully overcome, as the ending suggests, Oife's narration functions as scriptotherapy, an act of reclaiming the stolen agency, which replaces the shallow, evil stepmother label with the complexity of a human being and the dignity of a woman whose story deserves to be heard. These are the references, and thank you for your time and attention. And I welcome many questions. Thank you.